You just see how much better the athletes are getting, right? Guys are getting so fast and big and strong. It's impressive.
Yeah, it really is. It's pretty amazing. I look back on it as, man, I was eating double quarter pounders trying to put on 10 pounds from Wendy's in a large frosty shake. I don't think that's how they do it today.
Like the creatine and then a bunch of pizza and ice cream and whatever else. It's just
Give
like,
me
just get all the calories you can.
a large home team pizza and a 12 pack of Budweiser. And then I got 15 pounds by next year, coach.
And the home team was only $6 too, wasn't it? One of those was
It
only
was
like six
cheap.
dollars. Yeah, I was like, man, how is a whole pizza $6 back then? That was amazing. Welcome to the Gallery and Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind the scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
Today we are joined by DeVries, one of the most dominant defensive linemen to come through Iowa. He was a force for the Hawkeyes in the late 90s and went on to have a long career in the NFL with the Detroit Lions. We'll talk about his journey, the lessons he's learned along the way, and some great stories from his playing days. This should be a fun one. My first question would be, Aplington-Parkersburg turned out at least three really top-end athletes, if not four, right? You, Casey Wigman, your brother, and then there's Aaron Campman too, right? No,
Three. No,
come on now.
I was
Come on
being hard
now.
on myself.
No, not at all. I'm not letting that go. Everybody on these podcasts gets so damn modest. I'm not letting that fly.
No, there was four of us: Wiggs, myself, Brad Meester, who had a 16-year career at Jacksonville, and then Camp at Green Bay, and then Jacksonville. But yeah, it's pretty special. Not a whole lot of communities can say they've got four NFL guys or former NFL guys. That town is only 2,000 people.
Combined.
Yeah. On the combined, it's probably almost three now. They did a study that per capita, it was by far the most NFL players. And then Coach Thomas obviously won the NFL Coach of the Year award as well. That was quite an honor.
And your brother Darren also played basketball too, right?
He played at Northern Iowa. My sister played volleyball at Northern Iowa. She started at Iowa State, didn't enjoy it as much as she thought. So she finished her career at Northern Iowa. She was on the team that made it to the Final Four. I think they got beat by Notre Dame. They've always had a powerhouse volleyball team. And my niece is there now. We were able to go back this fall. She took a red shirt. So we have a lot of ties to Northern Iowa still.
That's great. And so what's the secret? Is it something in the water? Or like what's like, is it coaching? Is it just like happenstance or what? Is there any rhyme or reason to it?
I think it's a combination of values, hard work, coaching, and a little luck. You got to catch a break here and there to get seen, to make it at that level. And then if you're lucky enough to go on, you got to have a little luck. When people ask me this question, I always go back to the fact that look what positions we played. DNs and centers. They're not the most athletic positions, but if you're smart, work hard, you can succeed. And I think that's the values that our folks taught us, our coaches taught us. We got lucky.
I don't know if I'll let you have the luck with the amount of talent you guys had. Certain times it is.
I didn't have the skill to punt the ball 50 yards in the air or to kick the ball through an upright. I didn't have those type of skills. Mine was more put your hand in the dirt and go forward fastly.
We picked the easy route. You could,
Pretty good career running the ball too. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah. So Matt Millen, it was later in my career, and I don't know. Him and I have a special relationship. He obviously wasn't good at the GM role, but he's a heck of a person. And he actually tried to get me to long snap. It was probably year 8, 9. He goes, play to 20 years in the league if you learn how to long snap. And I tried and tried, and I just couldn't get it down. Don Muehlbach was our long snapper for the longest time. I think he played like 18 years. You guys have that connection. It's like the three amigos, the kicker, the punter, the holder, and throw a long snapper in there.
you got to be a little bit off, I think, in the head to get into the long snapping mentality and the punting and kicking crew. It's just a different thing, like you were saying about putting your hand down and going hard forward. It's a bit of the opposite of that, right?
Imagine there's a few more mental hurdles you have to overcome when you're lined up at the 50 or 40-yard line. You got to perform.
Yeah, and I guess that was probably my problem. I wanted to run out and just kill people and then be like, okay, now go punt. And I was like, okay, that worked out. And then, of course, the next time I'd be like, oh, God, that was horrible. It's a hard mindset to get in coming from the other side of playing and being aggressive at those things. So it's a little more cerebral.
I always
What's
had
that?
thought that you should have been a linebacker.
I thought I was, but I don't know if I could have played. Who knows? I had
Yeah,
dreams of doing
the
it,
hard
but my mind was in playing a position, but I was a punter.
I tell you now, it's not just tight end you, it's punter you. With everything going on with the LeVar special teams, and just seems like it's a punting factory now.
LeVar, to his credit, has that place rolling. I watched a game with Torrey Taylor a handful of years ago, and I was like, I wouldn't be able to play right now. I was literally like, I don't have the skills to do this. So it was fun to watch. The kid was putting on a clinic. It was amazing.
Yeah, Jalen and I were at the spring game this past year. I guess they don't call it a spring game anymore. It's a spring practice or whatever. The loudest ovation was when the new punter,
restaken.
he coffin corners one, it like goes out on the 4 or 3 yard line, and the crowd goes crazy. Wow. No longer about Tavian and Timmy running kicks and running touchdowns back, but now we're all about kicking coffin corners.
Iowa loves their punters when you can do well.
It's amazing.
Punting was not cool when we were there.
People got excited about it. I remember I'd be a few years out of playing and people would be like, oh, you were the punter at Iowa. What other team in America would people even know who the punter was at any given year of any football team ever? Zero people. It was such a specific time that people remember those type things, which is funny.
Yeah. No, it's now tight end you and punter you.
Guess they're starting to get linebackers too and linemen, right? All sorts of play, right?
Yeah. It's an O-line factory. AJ's having a fantastic career, and I'm anxious to see what he's going to do there. It's exciting times for the Hawks. The question is, how long is Coach going to keep coaching?
That's a good question, right?
25.
He's 25? Oh, God. Shit.
And he's got 4 more years on his contract.
Yeah, but he was a couple wins away from being the all-time winningest coach, right?
Yeah, he'll break some Big Ten record this year.
He's done a fantastic job. I'll always analyze everything. Like, why are the Hawks successful? Why are the Steelers successful? Well, they don't change their head coach every 2 years. They stick with them. We haven't won a national championship at Iowa, but we've been successful for a long period of time. I've had, 3 coaches in 60 years, being Tomlin and Chuck Noll and Cowher.
Yeah.
That's a long period of time to maintain success. That to me says something. The 49ers jump into my mind. In our own part, Detroit, I had 7 head coaches in 12 years. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but we weren't very good. You can't keep doing that. You got to find your guy and you got to stick with him. And I think that's what I was done, obviously, with Fry.
All the coaches and McCaffrey and Gable.
Yeah, yes.
Brands. I think that's what I do like about that. I don't, on a whim, change coaches because they had one bad year or 2 bad years.
Don't have a knee-jerk reaction.
And everybody, too. It's staff, right? You see some of these staff people that have been there 30 plus years. The assistant coaches that stick around.
Reedy even sticks around.
That's what we were saying. It's like Reedy's been there for, yeah.
He's a staple at Iowa football. Reedy.
It's just like this continuity of it. It is awesome. Some people have grumbled about the lack of national championships and national prominence, but I think the thing I'm most proud of is the guys that he's churned out of there, right? Good, solid, hardworking guys. It's the same class of people, which I really love. We went back for a game, happened to meet up with him in the hallway. He sat there and talked to us for 40 minutes. I was like, don't you have other stuff to be doing? And I was like, man, you got a big game to play today. What are you doing here sitting and talk to us? You know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Nick. What they've been able to turn out of that university is remarkable in a lot of different sports as well. You look back, even I just says a couple of years ago, Kenyon Murray and all the Murray twins. His dad played way back when we were. Cool to see.
It's great, the legacies and the long-standing tradition. It's been a fun school to be a part of. Let's dive into your high school experience and talk about getting started in sports. Talk about when you started to think that you would have the ability to play beyond high school and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and I've answered it in my senior biographies. You get your headshot and what you want to do. And I kid you not, mine was I'm going to play on Sundays. Now, that's probably more of an unrealistic goal, but that was my dream. My parents taught me to dream big and shoot for the stars. I always thought that I would achieve success. I didn't realize that it would come to the level it came to, because that was more of a hope and a prayer. Having success, AP allowed me to get to Iowa and then get my foot in the door at the NFL. I always go back to my parents, coaches, and teammates, because without one of those components, the dreams sometimes don't get realized.
I think it's interesting to dig into people that have had success. What are those components that really do that? That is the people around you, the belief, and doing the work. Some guys talk about the fear of letting their teammates down, and that drove them. Or just, I don't want to mess it up for everyone else. So it's interesting to dive into those parts. You started having some success in high school. To talk about your recruiting a little bit. Were the Hawkeyes kind of on the radar early? I'm assuming you had some decent interest early. You guys were doing well in state playoffs for a number of years through your time, or before your time.
The way I got discovered is we were up playing St. Ansgar. Matt Sherman, a renowned quarterback, not just at Iowa, but Midwest-wise. Iowa was up watching that game that we were playing, Matt and his team, and we just happened to show up and do pretty well. Coach Thomas had a nice relationship. Coach Elliott. I always wanted to be a Hawkeye. I had a few other offers, but I wanted to go to Iowa. I wouldn't say I was highly recruited. I really wasn't. In Nebraska, Wisconsin, Midwest schools. Once Iowa gave me the offer, it was not a, there was no thinking, what hat am I going to put on? Because it was going to be black and gold. Things have changed so much. It was so different than when the three of us went through that process. It's crazy with social media, and you almost have to advertise for yourself. I don't know if I'd have been any good at that.
Yeah, it's funny to think about just sending your tapes to places, or your neighbors, like saying, "Hey, you should check this kid out." Was it Tom Lemming or recruiting magazines that would have the top of the states in those rankings? I guess it was some self-promotion there, but it's just different platforms now that you can be a little more nationally recognized if you put in the time to build those things.
So I was having a conversation when I went back to spring practice. Coach Reese was like, yeah, I used to drive tapes. Like, you got to check this dude out. I would drive tapes down to a certain coach in the state, and that's how they got it. Now it's just a click of, hey, make me a huddle highlight. I want to send it to every contact that I have, and it's obviously a lot nicer for the coaches. You don't have to get up at midnight and go video hunting.
So what were you playing, though, position-wise in high school? Because you weren't D-line?
I was playing outside linebacker, DN. We ran a 5-2 monster. And then I played fullback, but it was a featured fullback. I'm not sure I would have been any good at blocking, but coach gave me a few opportunities to run the ball. And
just a few.
It's funny, though. Iowa never, ever even thought. Like, I give Timmy D hard time all the time because, or when I see him anyways, I go, the only guy to outrush you in the state of Iowa was a fullback. And Timmy was the deal.
He put up some stats.
I love to give Timmy a hard time about that.
But why was that not even a thought process? Because you were tall and skinny and they just knew you're going to fill out and they could see the athleticism? Or
I still talk to Coach Austin. That is a good question. I've never asked the question. They had Michael Berger, my roommate, that tight end. Then they switched him to fullback. And I'm like, did you guys not see my high school tape?
How much did you weigh at that point?
I reported to Iowa.
no
Okay.
way.
I left at 287.
You played your true freshman year.
I redshirted.
You did redshirt.
Yeah, you guys will remember this. Bobby Diaco was having some shoulder issues, and his shoulder was slipping in and out. Coach Brazier's, we need to switch to middle linebacker. I'm like, okay, I've never done this, but I did it because that's what the coach asked me to do. And I think we were playing Michigan. This would have been my freshman year. I hadn't redshirted yet, and I saw the size of those people. I'm like, Coach, I got a redshirt. I'm gonna get killed out there. And it all worked out. They slid me back to the defensive line, and it all worked out.
I'd forgotten about that part. That was
Yeah, I remember vividly. Oh my God, they might have to have me because Bobby's shoulder racked. If they put me in, I'm gonna get killed. It's like, okay, coach, I got a red shirt. I'm not ready yet. Then I redshirted from. I got to see Penn State, who we got demolished by. I went to Ohio State, which we got demolished by. I think Michigan came to us that year. I've seen enough. I'm not ready.
that
But
was
1994.
generational talent too. That's like the EA Sports game that you'd be like, okay, what's the best team of the decade? Let's play with those guys.
I wasn't ready for that.
There's
None of
someone
the
else mentioned that too. Didn't they? I can't
Larry
remember. Was
Blue?
it Demo or Larry? Yeah, said the same thing. Like they got out there, they were deciding that. Maybe Cedric was like,
Yeah.
Let's let all those animals graduate first.
They never graduated though.
True. Yeah. Let's let them go to the league. Let's let them leave early. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think Ohio State, we did the math once, and the team they would have had if half the guys hadn't gone to the league was even scarier. It was like Robert Smith would have been one running back, and Eddie George was the other one.
Robert Smith.
Smith or something, one of those guys.
I didn't play against him in college, but when he was at Minnesota, I thought he was one of the best running backs that I ever got to play against. He could put his foot in the dirt and get north and south quicker. Made me look foolish a few times.
I don't think you were the only one.
I always tell my guys, if you play the game of football long enough, you're going to get got. And that's okay. Just pick yourself up. They're good too. You're not going to win every battle. You got to win more than you lose, but that's how I approached it. Trying to win a few more than you lose.
You have to have that resilience, don't you? You're going to mess up. There's a lot of people watching. Someone's going to be better than you. It's an interesting mindset to be able to compete, but also know that there's people that are head and shoulders above you.
It was the measuring stick for me. I knew I couldn't run as fast or jump as high as that guy, but I thought the effort that I played with equaled the playing field, if you want to say. And that's what I hung my hat on. I don't have the talent some of these guys have, but I can outwork them. I can prepare better. I can be relied upon. And I think that's the success that I enjoyed to continue my career.
Yeah, for sure. It got to be later in your career where they would double team you and really game plan against you. As a redshirt freshman, you had a really good season, right? And I'm sure they figured out, oh shit, we got to start thinking about this guy.
I remember my very first game against Northern Iowa. I wouldn't have ever played my freshman year if it wouldn't have been for Chris Webb stepping away from football. That dude was so good. I was his backup. And he stepped away from football, and I'm like, uh-oh, now it's my turn. I think some of my success was out of fear because I was afraid those guys were going to get after me. And I'm like, oh no, what do I do? My very first game, I have 3 sacks against Northern Iowa. I go, what is so hard about this? It got harder.
I remember, I think I've told the story before, but I remember Chris Webb in a scrimmage. Somebody cut him or something and really pissed him off. He punched somebody, and I thought it was going to knock the guy off his feet. Everybody turned and walked away. Okay, leave that guy alone. He just was that strong and powerful.
He was unbelievable. When we opened our grocery store in Sigourney, where he's from, I said, you got to do a signing with Kirchhoff and I. And I said, don't make me beg because you are the legend. He was able to get the night off, and we had a good time. He is the legend in Sigourney. He knew everybody by their first name. Hey, Steve, who do you want me to address this to? It was fun. I don't know if we'd want to tell every story we had with each other. We're good.
Yeah, we can leave a few out for sure. Yeah. I think that's the way with everyone. That's growing up, right? That's being 22 years old.
Tell your buddies or like you and I are like we're doing right now, and you're trying to be somewhat of a role model now that you're probably not a role model for your kids anymore because they're 25 years old or 23 years old. And I'm like, don't tell that story. They still think I'm a pretty good guy.
There is that point, right, where your friends start telling these stories to the kids, and the
Yeah.
kids are like,
Oh,
what?
they don't care.
My favorite too is I got to the point where we started telling my parents about some of the stuff we did, and they were just like their eyes got big. Like, what? Yeah, you felt old enough that you were like, all right, I'm gonna give you a little insight on some of the stuff that went on.
I've gotten through almost 50 years of life. They still thinks I'm a pretty good son. I love talking about the old times. My wife, Jamie, she says, you know what? You will know the score of a game and who you were playing, but you can't remember what I asked you to do yesterday. Uh,
That might be a coach thing too, right? I think who is the Sean McVay that's the coach for the Rams?
yeah.
They were talking about a game or something, and he ripped off the play from 7 years ago. It's like that kind of mentality of you just log those things away. It's like easily accessible.
Could be.
And you were recruited by Coach Elliott, right?
Yep.
Sorry.
I said he was my guy. God rest his soul. What a great person. Great coach. Yeah. If he hadn't got ill, I truly believe he'd have been the next head coach.
For sure.
Obviously, his coaching career speaks for itself. The person he is speaks for. I couldn't say enough good things. We wouldn't have enough time.
He comes up in almost all of our podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. That old staff, if you really want to look at it, the coaching tree, everybody talks about the Belichick tree, but you talk about the Fried tree, that's a big tree, coaching wise.
And the thing that doesn't get talked about is the high school part of that too, right? Guys like you, like Marv Cook, like Jason Dumont, Matt Hughes. There's a whole high school tree of that you don't even realize, right?
Yep.
John LaFleur, right?
Yep.
All these guys are molding kids all over the place. They're doing well and having success and all that. So yeah, it's even farther than people realize, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't looked at that aspect. I just looked at the college aspect of it, but yeah, you're exactly right. There are so many guys that have gone through that program that are high school, even college coaches, which is remarkable.
And those coaches didn't walk into big programs. They went to Kansas State, Bill Snyder,
Yep.
Wisconsin, Alvarez. They went to the worst programs in the country and made them into powerhouses. That's in itself is a whole nother level of that coaching tree.
They weren't taking over five-time national champions football team. They weren't getting every recruit. They had to go work and they had to go earn it. Just like Coach Fry did and turned the Hawkeye program around to what it is today. Pretty remarkable.
Did you get like a home visit from Coach Fry at all, or because you were pretty high in the Iowa, he didn't have to come visit, or how did that work?
See, this is where I have maybe some not misremembering, but my dad says that he called when he had landlines. So he wasn't calling on any cell phone, but he called on a landline and got a hold of my parents and scheduled another time. I don't remember any of that. My dad tells me he showed up at our home, but I don't remember. I always just remember going to Iowa City and getting that offer. So I don't know. That part escapes me a little bit.
You wouldn't have looked good in red and white anyway.
I do remember Coach Elliott would come and he never could talk. They would talk to Coach Thomas and he'd watch us work out early in the morning. I remember that interaction. The thing I remember about Coach Fry is when he pulled us into the office, we were up with my folks and I'm like, I can be a Hawkeye if I want to be. I sure did.
Did you have a good workout program in high school?
Not until we got under Coach Thomas. We were just Aplington until my junior year. When you talk about a high school program, it literally was a bench, a squat rack on the band stage that they would close the doors on basketball nights. That's literally what it was. And Coach Thomas, he did the bigger, faster, stronger, I think, which was kind of Nebraska's deal at the time. But he had a very organized program and really got us kick-started.
What year was that? The bigger, faster, stronger, because City did that in
It'd have been 92.
91, 92,
Yeah.
by the same time.
Yeah. But Coach Thomas wouldn't let us squat. he was big into, we leg pressed a lot, but he wouldn't let us squat. We didn't do Olympic lifts. That was just his deal. Science has evolved, as we all know. Nutrition has evolved. Things are different than they were, let's be honest, 35 years ago. That's scary.
No more hammer strength. Does hammer strength survive all that?
They did.
Yeah. I still
And
see
that was hammer strength is what we had. We did leg curls, leg extensions, a leg press, and then he had us do bench, incline, upright row. That was it. No biceps, no triceps. Didn't need to do those.
That's great.
And it's just amazing how that whole aspect of sport has evolved. Like the dietitians, look what they have available to them today. I'm like, holy cow. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the tracking and some of those things, even the stuff that probably does to come, it's interesting, right? The biodynamics and some of those things, sleep and
Sleep.
recovery. It's insane. You just see how much better the athletes are getting, right? Guys are getting so fast and big and strong. It's impressive.
Yeah, it really is. It's pretty amazing. I look back on it, man, I was eating double quarter pounders trying to put on 10 pounds from Wendy's in a large frosty shake. I don't think that's how they do it today.
Like the creatine and then a bunch of pizza and ice cream and whatever else. It's just like, just get all the calories you can.
A large home team pizza and a 12-pack of Budweiser. And then I got 15 pounds by next year, coach.
And the home team was only $6 too, wasn't it? One of those was
It
only
was
like $6. Yeah, I was like, man, how is a whole pizza $6 back then? That was amazing. Where?
Hey, do you guys remember the olive pit, right? That's
Yeah,
where
yeah,
Yeah.
can't forget it. Definitely.
somebody texted me, he goes, hey, the olive pit. And then there was 4 or 5 apartments in the back there. It's for sale.
Oh, is it?
No way.
I thought it got leveled when they put it in the hotel.
No,
Oh, it's still there?
still there. I went by it. I'm like, Jamie, you remember this, right?
Oh God, you're doing
All
this?
that stuff back where that big grass lot you
Yep.
parked
Yeah.
that's all developed now. It's crazy.
This for everyone who doesn't know, this is right off Melrose, right before you get to the bridge, and you take a
Yeah.
left, and then down that hill back there, it was your guys' house that a bunch of guys roomed in over the years. And then there's that big open area that people would tailgate in.
I slept on the couch for a year. I was supposed to still be in the dorms, but Wiggs and Ian Davis and all those guys said, if you do some chores for us, we'll let you stay on the couch.
Oh, that's great. You guys gonna buy it? You should all pull together, you and Wiggs and
Ian,
Ian,
Jailer.
but the younger guy, what's his name? Jason?
Oh, yeah,
No?
Jason. He's got a few spots here in Des Moines. He's doing really well.
Yeah, that place was funny. That was a great.
Oh, it was funny, but I don't know if my now wife would have thought it was so clean.
I don't think any of our places were really that clean. It wasn't our forte.
But it was
Didn't
just so
bother
clean.
any. We thought it was totally normal.
At the bottom of the bathtub is black. It's fine. It should be that color, right?
Just use it for newspapers.
Yeah, exactly.
You shower at the facility.
Yeah.
I do remember that though. How do you take a shower in this place? There's all sorts of magazines and newspapers in the tub. We don't shower here. That's a facility. And I went downstairs. There was a shower downstairs. I got to paint this place. I got to bleach it. I'm going to have to shower here at some point.
That's amazing. I don't know if I would have taken you for the one to clean it.
The clean guy. I was the clean guy. Ian and Shaler always have to be picking
Shaler,
up.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about that. That was super close to the facility. A great spot for you guys then.
That was everybody wanted to be in the pit. Yeah. So
Hurley. Most of us.
We got the ridge. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe a
A
nicer.
second the pit.
I lived in the Ridge with a golfer one summer. Anyways, yeah. I was able to run into him quite a bit. I think Colorado State, I believe.
Oh, did he coaching wise? Nice. I haven't
Yeah.
talked to him in a while.
Their staff got released last year, and then him and I ran up into each other in Iowa City. He was at Easton's event as well, so that was good to see him. He's a big man. Holy
Huge,
cow.
right? Head and neck like this big, right? He's just
He's
a
a-
huge human.
I'm not that big anymore, but he dwarfs me. He's a big man. Always has been. The big burly hands. I remember when we were playing him when he was playing for Cincinnati, and he just shocked the heck out of me. And I'm like, oh, I can't get away from this guy.
And you look at his hands, and it's like his fingers doing his finger
Yeah,
does this. Like there's like 3 or 4 of them that are offshoots that shouldn't be going that direction. And the size of a glove, you're like, you
yeah,
shake his hand, you're like, shit, take your glove off, bro. And you're like, that's your actual hand. That old school
yeah,
farmer handshake. I
yeah.
had a couple uncles like that you shake their hand, you're like, good man, they got like
They
serious
got
grip.
pause for sure.
How was your recruiting trip? Who was your host?
Wigman was my host.
You had a good time.
Good time. The boys showed me a good time. I was coming either way, so no, it was fun. Some of those things you don't know as a 17-year-old senior in high school.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they had you sealed deal. It's like Casey Wigman's your host. They're just like, yeah, they were like, there's no way he's going anywhere else. So they weren't worried at all.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. So special when they put your name on the back of your jersey. It makes me happy. I'm like, man, it's possible.
They do a great job, right? And then you get those basketball games that you can sit in the front row. It's a really exciting time. It just gets you jazzed up. The fans were amazing. That whole
Yeah.
process is great. You meet other guys that start to think about going there. It's a really cool thing. It's, at least for me.
You start building all these relationships, and that was the cool thing. You see what Iowa stands for and what the fans mean to the basketball team. I'm like, I can get behind this. They could be cheering for me someday. That stuff is really cool.
And even the little things. I remember in high school, one of the referees was like, oh man, I'm going to enjoy watching you play on Saturday. The whole community gets involved, right? The whole state, it's a really hometown thing. People get so excited. Like you were saying about Tim, people were excited to watch him play. Just people that weren't even involved with the program. And it's such a great way to bring communities together. And that it was cool in those regards.
Well, you don't have a professional team in the state, and fans resonate with the universities. They're gung ho, and that's what makes Iowa so special.
Did you think about playing basketball?
I'll tell you a quick story on this one. Northern Iowa was recruiting me and they were going to allow me to play both. My brother was there. This is the honest to God conversation. I go, yeah, I'm thinking about going to UNI. They're going to let me play both. And he looked at me. He says, you don't have a future in basketball. You got to go to Iowa. And I'm like, why do you say that? You're 6'4". You can't shoot outside the free throw lane. It's just not going to work. So I chose Iowa. So I have my older brother Darren to thank for that journey.
All right.
That
Fans
would have
will
been
love
fun
them
to play
anyway.
with. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, it would have
be able
been
to play
fun,
together.
but
That would have been great.
I think maybe overestimated my basketball talents. Maybe I was just on a really good team.
You guys went to state of basketball too, didn't you?
We won 76 games in a row. We would have three-peated if we didn't run into Rafe LaFrenz and that team. Rafe was a hell of a player, but it was a guy, I can't remember his name. I think it was Brian, but he was unconscious from three, and we were a run and gun team, and we went 3 for 21 from the arc. We lost by 3 or 4 points. We had our community was big time. We were more of a basketball community at Aplington. When we joined, we became good at both. My senior year, we were awful, like 3-8. I was debating on not coming back the year before, and Coach Austin's convinced me, oh, we're going to be so much better offensively. And I'm like, okay, we'll give it another run. 3-8, didn't make a bowl. Coach Fry and we left together. I'm not really the proudest moment sending him out, getting beat by Iowa State, not getting him to a bowl. But I guess way it goes sometimes.
The seasons happen, right? We have a lot of talent and it just don't fall together for whatever reason, injuries and different situations like that. I guess I've always been curious. That time you had a really good junior season and you were thinking about going to the NFL. How hard did the coaches push on you to stay? Were they nonchalant about it or were they really after you?
I would call helpful. Times are different now where they do a lot more projections. I don't know if it was Coach E or Coach Austin just talked to some scouts that would come through the building and they thought he's a tweener, he's too little, he'd be better off sticking around. It all turned out well. I think Aaron Gibson and I had the highest grade of juniors coming back, the big tackle from Wisconsin who actually ended up getting drafted by Detroit as well. I think it all happens for a reason. I didn't get drafted where I was projected to get drafted. Maybe things don't work out the way they do. If you get drafted higher, maybe you don't have a 12-year NFL career. I don't know. I'm pretty happy with the way they turned out. It's another year of relationship that I was able to build with my wife, or soon to be wife. So yeah, all turned out well.
I think you were talking about luck earlier. That seems to play into those situations more in that case, like whether you're in the right system, you're the right size. Also, if you can stay healthy, who's in front of you. There's all those pieces that matter that way.
The draft, a big puzzle because you got 32 teams evaluating a lot of players with needs and whatnot. Chris Claiborne, the linebacker of USC, fell. So Detroit moved up to get him because they had him way high. They got him at 9, and then Gibson was at 20, where they were going to go Gibson, DeVries, and I'm learning all this after the fact, but that's just the luck of it. And then they picked me back up in the 3rd round when I was still available. The draft is totally, unless you're a quarterback and you're number 1 pick, but otherwise things slide and moves. There's no predicting an NFL draft.
Yeah, it's like a moving Jenga puzzle at all points, right? It's like
Yeah.
something moves and then the whole thing shuffles. They have to be making decisions of who they want, who's the best person at that time. It's interesting now that they will give more of a look into that with the cameras and that stuff where you see what it's like. Amazing process.
I think the Lions of anybody over the last few years have gotten it right. They're drafting to their culture, their coach's culture, Brad culture. Probably one of the biggest things they did is hired Spielman as a consultant to Mrs. Ford. He knew exactly what Detroit needed and was able to get Dan. I'm just so happy for the Detroit organization, that city and fan base. We struggled through it together and go back to a game now, and it's not even the same. Man, this would have been unbelievable.
Yeah, I was bummed they didn't get farther this year after the injuries and all that stuff. It would have been fun to watch that game with them in there, or at least the Bills too, right?
Caught up with them, but you can't turn the ball over 4 times and expect to win football games. That just doesn't happen. Not in the NFL. I did.
Yeah, sure.
Go to a few games, and the atmosphere they've created in there is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's cool to watch and you see the city get around it and all those things.
And I actually think even last year, it felt like the whole country was pulling for the Lions. Here's this pretty much cellar dweller for decades, and now it just felt like the whole country was pulling for the Lions. And I think you had a little bit of that carry over this year, and then maybe now you're the villain because now you're good. And I don't know. It was fun.
Are you with the organization? Do they pull in
Yeah.
ex-players easily, or how does that work?
So that's what I am most surprised about, because I figured it was going to be similar to a relationship that we developed in college, your lifelong buddies. But you got families. Family moves up the list. It's not football, it's family. Then you go your separate ways, and it's hard to stay in touch. Robert Porcher taught me a fantastic lesson. He goes, even if it's once a month, try to call your guys. Or if it's every 3 months, just call your guys and stay in touch. I've tried to do that with a handful of guys that I've built relationships with, but with us clearing house all the time, there's very few coaches. Dan is the only coach left he wasn't the coach, but we played together. And then Coach Clem's in the area, and it's almost out of sight, out of mind. I get it because they're moved on to another team and they've got their family they got to take care of. I get that. I just thought those relationships would last longer and be more than they are, at least for me. Seems like I have a stronger connection with the Iowa guys than I do with the Detroit guys. I mean, I still stay in touch with some of them, but not as many.
We talked about that in one of the other episodes. We were saying how much more time you spend with them, right? You just have a lot more time to bond, and you're done with practice and you're in the NFL, then you go to your family and you go home, or you don't necessarily, like, I guess it depends on the team, right? The younger teams, some of those guys will spend more time out at nights and those things, but I think it's a harder thing because everybody's got, just different different priorities and that.
Think about,
Living together, all that stuff. Yeah.
Our situation, you get done with practice, and besides getting your homework done, you go on to hang out with 5 or 6 of your roommates that are on the football team. No offense to my teammates in Detroit, but I would rather go home to my wife and children. So, yeah, it's all the situation, but it's certainly been fun, interesting, entertaining to look back at it and just the nuances of the different stages.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any more we want to talk about at college?
I want to hear a little bit more of your progression. You start at 205 and then you work your way up. You get thrown in your true freshman or redshirt freshman year. How did you develop over those years? It seemed like you just came right in and started this piece of cake. It seemed natural and easy for you. I don't know if that was because you had a different background coming in. You had the athleticism as a running back to then switch to D line and they didn't know how to handle you. How do you think you did so well?
I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you. There's a little luck involved in that. I was 240 pounds and I was lined up against the guy from Michigan State, Bill Adams. Thank you. He was 330 pounds. I'm like, oh boy. I think I experienced enough success early that I'm like, maybe I am pretty good. I just grew into my body and mentality. I just never thought I would lose.
Yeah, you just wear people down. You could tell if I keep coming at them, they're going to eventually break. Or you said, I'm going to outwill my opponent.
I definitely don't want to over-evaluate my athleticism. You don't make it to Division I football if you're not athletic. But I just feel like it was more my effort, grit, and determination than it was my athletic prowess. I wasn't the fastest, although you weren't going to beat me in a sprint. It's just a mindset for me.
Hello, and welcome to our wonderful University of Iowa Stead Family Children's Hospital. This beautiful building, which opened to patients in the early months of 2017, has provided children with the ideal healing environment to match our world-class system of healthcare. We are Iowa's only comprehensive children's hospital, meaning we offer every pediatric subspecialty. We have the UI Stead Family Children's Hospital Press Box, a special viewing space with the city's best view of Kinnick Stadium. Many children and their families have caught a Hawkeye football game from this spot and taken part in the other side of Iowa's greatest tradition, the wave. The ultimate gesture of care and compassion. And the next time you're looking up at our windows, please give a wave.
What are some of the game memories that come to mind when you think back?
One that comes to mind is the Michigan game. When we had them down, we really had no business losing that game. We really didn't.
This is the 97 year, your junior
year. Yeah, the year they won the Rose Bowl National Championship.
Yep.
That game comes to mind because I had experienced some personal success, but I knew what they were going to run before they ran it. Coaches did a wonderful job. It was an experience of a lifetime, although on the losing end, which I don't like to speak about, but going into the big house and being able to hear a pin drop at halftime was pretty enjoyable.
Yes. It's funny how that place isn't as loud as it should be either, right? It's like the sound goes up because there's 105,000, but it should be deafening. And it was loud, but it wasn't overwhelming. Where like Ohio State, a couple of those times, that was overwhelming. Sound bouncing off sound where you just vibrating your head.
I'll throw it out to you guys. What is the hardest stadium you've ever played in? I almost think it was Wisconsin. Besides Kinnick, as far as home field advantage goes, what did you guys think?
They didn't really realize the advantage that Kinnick had, how close you were. It just was home, right? It was amazing, super loud and raucous, and the student section were crazy in that part. The place that really got me was Ohio State. I remember Sherman and the offense were on the 4-yard line trying to score. It got so loud, you could hear sound bouncing off sound. It was like, this is deafening. It was loud. I think Ohio State for me was like, all right, this is definitely, I can't think straight right now.
I forgot about Penn State because the year that we were getting drugged by them, and it was crazy, but the year that we went up there and coach named it Happy Hawkeye Valley. I think.
Happy Hawkeye Valley.
So obviously they're not cheering as loud when they're getting beat, but that place was loud. And now that you guys say that, I would probably put that above Wisconsin and Ohio State. That damn cat. And then when they're beating you so bad, the row goes up like every other play.
Yep.
Yeah, it went off like 360 times in that game. Wisconsin was a fun place, but that felt more like Kinnick, just the away version of that, like a high school rivalry where the opposing school had the other half of the bleachers, standing room everywhere. One of those electric places. It was definitely to their advantage.
I would agree with you. Penn State was overwhelming.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, yeah. And especially on that one end that they had the double deck, I think that was super, super loud.
The other one was Iowa State because of the wind. They didn't have it closed off back then. Nick and I's probably worst game ever punting was like our freshman year, Nick's true freshman year, but it was like 30-mile-an-hour wind coming through and there's nothing stopping it. And there's no closure on that one end on the south end zone at the time. So that was just the whole conditions.
That's because you guys were kickers and punters. Again,
yes.
That was just breeze for us. Big up.
That's right.
Breeze. That keeps us cool. We actually like that.
Absolutely, we did.
That's funny. Brian was asking about what you thought your success was from. I think you had three different things. If I'm looking at it from the outsider, you had some size, you were fast, and you were strong, and you came every play. That's a hard combination to beat, right? People take plays off. I don't think you took plays off. You could run, I don't know what you ran at the combine, but you were pretty fast for a 280-pound guy, right? Or 260 or 50 or whatever you were. You had some wheels that way because I remember you chasing running backs down to a certain degree. So I think that was part of what'd you run in the combine.
Jamie and I got married. We went down to Louisiana to train. First day of training, I told my trainer this. I said, I haven't been working out because I was coming off an injury, plantar fasciitis injury at Iowa. So I hadn't been training. And he goes, man, what do you mean you haven't been training? You're moving good. So he put me on overspeed training and I tore my hamstring the very first day. I couldn't go to the Senior Bowl and then ran poorly at the combine, like 4.9 too poorly. Like I'm a 4.6 guy, but just not.
I was gonna say, you had that speed where you were chasing people down. So
you
were 4.6,
It was a situation. It just happened.
Yeah. And like the combine's a hard place to run fast, right? You're going to be the lightest, shortest, slowest, weakest, right, at the combine, right? That's everybody, though. It's hard. They stack it to do that. They want it to be the worst performance you ever have.
No, it's all big melting pot of the journey.
Yeah, let's talk about your transition into the NFL. If I remember correctly, you got hurt a few years in. You were hurt for a number of years there, weren't you?
There was only one off season that I did not have surgery. So that tells you anything. My very first training camp, Cedric Shaw, we drafted from Michigan State, stepped on my foot as I was cutting inside and broke the bone that holds your arch up. And I was 12 weeks non-weight bearing. They didn't put me on IR. Why, I have no idea. So, yeah. So I dealt with quite a few injuries. I think 13 surgeries in 12 years. I had to. Didn't miss a whole lot of the seasons, was able to get through it. But, yeah, that's part of the game.
Talk about the transition. The level of talent is increased. The expectations are probably different. Can you talk about some of that and how you thought about that going in? If you thought you were going to be successful, just talk about that.
I had good mentors. James Jones from Northern Iowa, Robert Porcher, who I talked about already. They really taught me what a pro needs to act like, how to conduct themselves. I talked earlier about being reliable, dependable. That's the thing that kept me in the league for 12 years. I was willing to do what the coaches asked and not ask questions. I was obviously very fortunate. But there comes a lot of luck. To survive 7 coaching changes and stay at one organization is not common.
Was there ever an opportunity where you could have left or that you were getting potentially traded or anything like that?
Never had any trade talks, but we were a free agent and we had spent some time. Dick Duran was one of our head coaches and he was up in Buffalo. Jamie will tell you she left to buy a Buffalo Bills hat because she was certain we were going to Buffalo. By the time she got back, Detroit kept us there. So we were fortunate to be in Detroit. Obviously, we'd love to have been on more winning teams, but to raise your boys in one city, that's pretty cool. The relationships that we built is really cool. We still have friends that our kids were friends with, parents become friends, and they're coming to our nieces' weddings, and we're going out there. It was a cool deal.
Can you talk about what it's like to have that many coaches? I think for guys that get drafted at certain spots, the fans and the media expect them to show up and do certain things. But I think the things that gets lost is stuff like you're talking about, the coaching changes and that part. So can you talk more about what was that like of being like, okay, this year we're running this defensive scheme and we have these people. And then next thing, someone else comes in with a different culture and all the different parts. Talk to that because I think people get lost in the facts of, oh, this guy didn't live up to his potential. I'm not saying you, but people in general don't know how chaotic and crazy that is. So talk to that if you would.
It is. When Matt Millen came in, they said when a new head coach comes in, the roster turns over by 65%. Now you've learned how to play a 8 technique this way, and now this coach wants you to do it this way. The fine details of your profession constantly change. It's hard to get really good at it. And that's why I'm going to go back to the conversation when you don't do that. The Steelers, the Niners, the Hawkeyes, those teams long term are good because their players know exactly what to expect. Technique. It's like learning a new playbook every year. And there was only a few of them that I didn't have to learn a new playbook. That's hard. Not as hard defensively, but very hard offensively. Can you imagine playing quarterback and playing on 7 different head coaches and 7, probably more different coordinators? Like we talked about just putting our hand in the dirt and yeah, the techniques change a little. The wordage might change, but can you imagine learning an offensive system as a quarterback when there's bullets are flying around? Like that'd be really hard.
You'd be just focused on learning instead of actually executing, right? You'd just be like, all right, these people go in the right direction, and then not getting into the finer points of, like, okay, this is where I can exploit things. This is what I need to get done. Showing up and have a different person you deal with, right? You don't have any trust. You don't have any personal relationship that's, hey, we're in this together. We're going for the same goal, but you just got off a plane yesterday and we're playing against some really good teams. I think that gets lost.
It was a big challenge. I'm still convinced you got to just stick with you can't have knee-jerk reactions and you got to stick with it.
Yeah, for sure. You were saying about being a professional. I think that's something you hear a lot. Guys who are pros, right? What does that mean? It's like being on time, practicing hard every day. Is there more to that, or is it just showing up in a workmanlike manner? Or what else would you say about that?
What we're talking about is being a pro. It's being the first one to the office, the last one to leave, taking care of yourself, knowing your responsibilities, just doing every little thing to your utmost. I never had been fined, and I'm pretty proud of this. I've never been fined for off the field activity, for missing a doctor's appointment or not showing up to treatment on time, not turning in your playbook. The only time I've ever been fined in the NFL is on field things that happen on the field between the whistles.
Whoops.
That stuff happens. But being a professional is studying your craft, being as good at your craft as you can be. And yeah, it wasn't hard for me.
And so I guess to go deeper in that part, if you played for 12 years in the league and 5 in college, were you getting down to the minute things of looking at the knuckles of the offensive lineman? If they're putting weight in their fingers, are you getting that detailed? Like you're watching tape and you're like, okay, when this guy sets up like this, I know he's doing X.
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you a quick story. We went to Humboldt, high school team was playing, and I was the volunteer assistant. I called out run or pass every time because their right tackle was giving it away. Their Chang Yang is always on the visitor side. How do you know that? I said, because that offensive lineman stance. He goes, you haven't been wrong all night. I said, because he can't change it at halftime. He's 17-year-old. He's not changing at halftime. But those are the things that you get better at. And the first few years playing professionally, the game is fast, like really fast. Then you get comfortable and the game slows down. That's when you can start working at your craft a little better.
And was that something that your coach or your teammates, like the day you showed up, were they like, all right, here's what you should be doing? Or did you have to figure that out on your own?
You got to experience it. And then I got with a coach, Rod Marinelli, that really slowed the game down for me. There's only three things that offensive lineman's going to do. He's coming at you, he's going down, or he's going back. And all your read will come through that hip, and nothing else matters. Like you can get rid of all the formations, all the motions. Here's the three things. My career was probably going to be done. And then I got with him and it exploded. Like Matt would say, I've never seen anybody improve from year 7 to 8. He was such a good teacher that it really helped me a lot.
That's interesting to hear. I suppose after that many years, the pattern recognition kicks in too, right? You're watching hours and hours of film, you see it over and over again, and just okay, this is happening when this happens.
It's such a small window of success or failure. You can step where you're supposed to step, but if you step 6 inches inside or outside, that's the difference of making that tackle or not making the tackle. I always try to tell my high school guys this, but they don't understand. I wish I could give you all the knowledge because all those little things matter, but sometimes less is more in high school. Otherwise, you slow their feet down. Yada, yada.
And so you're saying the less amount of wasted motion is better. You're like, if you go,
for a D lineman,
you're just like economy of motion, basically.
no false steps.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. The little nuances, like even just picking up your plant foot. If you were a sprinter, you would never do that. And that's all we are as D linemen. We're just sprinting off the ball.
You wouldn't false step a race.
But you watch athletes, and even the best ones, I get tunnel vision. I'm like, he's false stepping every time. That's why he's not making that play. Collegiately, professionally, they still make mistakes. I did too. But when you can eliminate some of those, that would help you out.
I suppose there's two people. There's the top tier people that are just those crazy athletes that can get by with that, right? They can just cheat because they're better, I would assume. And then there's the guys that are great because they just don't do that. Would you say that's true or no?
Yeah. We call them freaks. There's things that they can do that not a lot of the mass majority of humans can do. Those people exist out there in the professional world. And then there's guys like myself that learned the craft as best as they could and hung in there as long as they could. But yeah, that's how God levels the playing field sometimes.
So the question I have for you is, when you were coaching high school kids, you must have had to have a lot of patience to be like, okay, I can see this huge picture. I can see detail of this, and then try to get them. They were 20 steps away from performance, but to have that knowledge and be like, I can show you everything. I can give you as much as you can take in, but to be able to scale back in that regard must have been hard to a certain degree.
Well, it was good. Darren gave me a great point when I got into coaching. He's like, don't forget your high school days. It's just about blocking, tackling, running. Don't overcomplicate it for these young athletes. That's what I thought I could bring to them. As far as D-line play goes, it's not hard. There's only 3 things you have to really learn or teach, and that's why I try to keep it as simple as possible. We probably had 4 plays and a few formations. That's what Coach Thomas was so great about. It was 52 traps, 36 power.
Yeah.
Everybody knew we were going to run it, but nobody could stop it because all the fine details, he just harped.
How are some of the guys that were toughest to compete against?
Yeah, I put Flozell up there right at the top. Orlando Pace was good. I was fortunate, or maybe unfortunate, to play against some of the elite tackles in the league. they're all elite, but there was some really good ones. But those are the guys.
Tony Baselli,
Maselli was one of them.
Jonathan Ogden, I'm guessing.
I had a good day against Jonathan. Might have caught him on a bad day. But yeah, Orlando was so hard because he was so big. And this is when he was with the Cowboys. Emmett would duck in there, and you're thinking, oh, he's going to go through the C gap, right? So I'm going to shed and get in there. And then Emmett would stick his foot in the dirt. And then you'd be the fool when Emmett's running down the sidelines, like, oh, that was my gap. Play long enough, you're going to get got. But yeah, there's some great guys I played against and great guys I played with. And it's been a lot of fun.
That Cowboys offensive line was huge as an understatement too, weren't they? Like, weren't those guys massive? They were giant, weren't they?
Larry Allen was on that team. There's highlights of him benching 700 pounds. I'm like, oh my goodness. They were good. Every guy that he went against was legit.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people don't realize as well. The talent's always there, right? Most teams, even if they're winning or losing, there's a ton of talent on those teams. It's just those few pieces that aren't fitting. It's a turnaround if you can get a handful of things right.
Yeah, the talent level on the NFL side, it's right there. It's right there. Depending on how much money you have to spend, but they're all getting really good dudes. Sometimes it's the fit with the coaches. Sometimes it's the organization. It's just something little. Let's talk about Dan Campbell. And he was not good his first 2 years. And going into his second year, I think they were 1-7. Then they went on a run. And then the next year they go to the NFC Championship game. And this year they're 16-1 or whatever they were. Like, it's the same coach, same players. It's like something clicked. You know what that is. Maybe they bought into his culture, but that's the same coach with basically the same roster. Now they've drafted well. NFL's all playing with a bunch of good dudes.
I guess I'd have a question for you too, and maybe this is just surface level and overgeneralized, but it's a momentum game, right? You'll see teams that'll rip off 5 wins in a row. You'll see teams that rip off 5 losses in a row. It's the teams that are able to sustain those winning streaks and limit the downside, I think. And probably the teams that get hot towards the end of the year have a good chance of going farther into the playoffs. So do you think that's a true statement, a momentum thing? Like, you win a couple games and you get hot, you keep building on that, or you lose some games and that kind of snowballs. Did you see that, or is that something I just maybe?
For us, losing, then it becomes, almost becomes a culture. You're always constantly trying to overcome that. But I think the teams that win just stay right there. They stay locked in at what they're due. They don't get too high with them. They don't get too lost. Look at the Super Bowl champs. The Eagles didn't start off good. They could have tanked it. Their coach was under fire. There was some turmoil, but stayed right there. I have to believe that. I wasn't in the locker room, but you look at their quarterback's face on the sideline, you very rarely see any emotion. Like, it's just matter of fact. I got to go out and do my job. And there's world champs. So I think you just stay right there. And it's not like a game of runs in basketball. I think you just got to stay focused, because every week is so monotonous. If you stay there and stay locked in, you're going to give yourself a great chance. It's like when you feel good about the last win is when you get beat.
Gotcha. It's interesting.
At least that's my opinion. Enjoy it for the night, but then flush it. You know, I keep coming back to Rod Marinelli because it's a cycle of a play. I told this to the football team when I spoke with them at Iowa. I'm like, why don't you see guys that are professionals get back-to-back sacks? Because they're too busy celebrating the last sack. The cycle of the play is analyze it, correct, and then flush it. You got to flush it. And that's what great players and teams can do. I'm convinced of it.
Amnesia, basically. Something happens, whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, you're just done, and you don't waste any extra energy celebrating or doing anything.
Analyze it, learn from it.
Interesting. It's funny, my brother used to get so mad when all the defensive linemen would celebrate. Those guys make one play and they celebrate all the time.
It's true. It's true.
Well,
Back-to-back sacks. It makes a lot of sense if you look at the psyche. It doesn't happen very often. Why doesn't it happen? You just got to flush it. Don't let the last play affect your next play. That's what Coach Marinelli had taught us. He was such a good D-line coach. A lot of the stuff I try to teach the kids is don't overthink it. It's not that complicated.
but it's interesting, like those little things can make a huge difference, right? I suppose it's like we talked to Nate Kading and he was going through his process of how he's registering his kicks and how his improvement process. And it just like this little bits that you're just trying to add and little pieces you're trying to add onto a decent, bigger body of work. That's interesting for me, seeing people playing at the highest level. What did they figure out that everyone else didn't, or what helped them get to that part besides just pure athleticism and those things too?
I don't know if it varies from position to position. And I never thought of it that way.
I would say as kickers, I did a terrible job of letting it just flush. I
Yeah.
would sit on that and
Yeah, I still can't flush.
Yeah, and if I could have learned that, I think that could have really been an advantage. But I dwell on that, think it over, and then it's affecting my next kick.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Yeah.
How did you be able to flush plays and do that?
Yeah, let's be honest. We're all human. We hang on to things. When you get beat, that lingers with you. But I did evolve into that, able to flush that.
How did you do that? Do you know specifically like how you were able to do it? Was it a practice? Or you were just like, all right, I've just got to let this go, talk yourself through it, or what?
It was the cycle of a play. And I learned that, okay, analyze it, learn from it, flush it. Doesn't matter the next play.
So it was just a learned behavior. You have more opportunities too, right? We have so few opportunities at times. You got a lot of time to sit there and think about it. Plus, you play 80 plays, 15 are bad, then that's a good game, right? Or something like that. 10 plays, maybe 5.
I don't know. To be honest, you would always want to be in the 90s percentile wise.
Is it 90s? Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it's a handful.
Those guys are getting paid.
And yeah, you have 10 out of 100 or whatever it is. It's not.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny that your brother would say that because that is totally correct. He could dominate a defensive end all game long. And that dude got 1 sack. I mean, it's put him in the Pro Bowl, you know.
It's
Seriously,
funny
if that guy gets 1 sack every game, he's going to be one of the greatest ever in the National Football League.
That's true. Yeah.
But if you're the offensive lineman, it doesn't work that way. He's got to be almost perfect. You got to bowl 300 every time.
Yeah, it is true. My little nephew was talking about where they want to play offense and defense, and I laughed and I was like, okay, if you play defense, it's like a guy like me or bigger than me is going to come and do this to you. And I grabbed him, drove block him a little bit, but you can celebrate every play, which pissed your dad off every play you make or whatever. So that was pretty entertaining.
It's so, yeah, I just got my ass kicked for, let's say 70 plays is average. I got kicked 69, but I made 1 sack, and then they're going to put me in the Pro Bowl this year. Like,
Yeah.
It's so true.
It's funny to think about in those terms. Hurls, you got any more
Just
NFL
like
questions?
how did you decide, or did the NFL decide for you? What was the time to wrap it up?
My body made that decision.
Okay. Did you know like at the end of the year that was it, or did you try to make a run at it next year and just say I can't do it? Or?
They sent me to have just a knee cleanup, and then they shut me down. My body was shot. I had a doctor say, Jared, you got to think about retiring. You're still sore from last Sunday. I didn't want to hear that truth. My body knew it was time, and that was the right decision for our family.
You can choose to pass on this question as well. This is probably a backward-looking statement in general. There's a part of football that is physically taxing, right? You get hurt, you're injured, you go through all these things, but there's this thought process of, okay, if I'm a good player, I'm a good teammate, then you push through these things at a detriment to your physical well-being, right? You showed me your hands and you had 13 surgeries. Is there ever that thought of, oh man, I gotta stop doing this to my body because I've got kids and I want to get out of the couch when I'm 60? I guess that's the hard part. It's a fun game. You have a lot of great lessons. There's all this good parts to it. But then there's also the physical devastation of it. It's not cool to be like, I'm going to get off the field because I can't move my arm or I broke something and I don't come back in 3 weeks. Is there ever a thought of that? Or you're just like, I guess it's like culture of each individual person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for me, it never was, just because I was doing something I loved, and I'll deal with the ramifications later. But I know there's some athletes that had gas left in the tank and they're like, no, I'm done. Whether that was a family decision, a health decision. So I think it varies with every athlete. For me, if they would let me play till I was 40, I would. You know, my body wouldn't let me. I love the game. I'd love to go play it again.
I guess what I said was more of a statement than a question. I remember times that Robert was on some not so great teams, and you would see guys take plays off because they're not going to win, right? You're down by 35 late in the fourth quarter. The possibility of coming back is almost zero. They would just take plays off, not go hard for whatever reason, whether it was risk of injury and that stuff. So it's a weird dynamic that way. If you're going to play long term, you have to be concerned about your body and your health. How do you meld that with, okay, I need to show up for my team and be a good player and be consistent? So there's that.
Yeah, for me, it was always about the team. It wasn't about my personal longevity or my personal statistics. Football's the greatest team sport they make. And yeah, it was always about the team. I've been a part of teams that I've had teammates that get injured just so they could collect a paycheck. You know, that happens. It's pretty much family and business and loving the ones we're around for us right now. A lot going on, but it's all good.
We really appreciate your time. Thanks for digging in on this and giving us a couple hours of your night. Great to reconnect again as well.
Absolutely. It's great seeing you guys.
Great seeing you.
Guys, take care.